This is 24 in 42. Welcome to 24 in 42, where we get to learn the life, universe, and everything of an author, and today it is my friend Alex Bledsoe. Alex and I have worked together a couple times. The very first time was with writing Fantasy Heroes, and I'll be putting up better pictures of this, where he wrote an excellent piece of advice on aging, your hero aging, and it also happens to be the only book of Rogue Blades that got translated into Mandarin. In addition, the one and only Rogue Blades novel that ever appeared, Alex and co-wrote with Tara Cardinal, and this was a very fun project. Alex and I met in the middle of a snowstorm in Wisconsin to sign some books in a library. But I
You have to narrow it down more than that. There's always a snowstorm in Wisconsin.
Well, I forgot to say it was in July too. No. So when I met Alex, he was a hard-boiled sword and sorcery type writer. And he has expanded quite a bit since then, a little bit more in the horror and the musical worlds. And I will let Alex tell us about that.
Well, I started out with my first novel, The Sword-Edged Blonde, which was, like you said, a fantasy novel written in the style of a 40s detective novel. And it was a project. I wrote the first draft of it when I was 18, and it was published when I was 44. So it sat around for a while. It went through a lot of different permutations.
Okay.
But it came out, it did well enough that they let me keep writing about that character. I did 5 more novels and several short stories as an ongoing thing. So that's my favorite character and my easiest character to write, because I can just drop into his voice, like that. Around the same time that I started with that, I also did a couple of vampire novels set in Memphis in the 1970s called Blood Groove and The Girls with Games of Blood. And hopefully someday there might be a third one to kind of wrap things up. I kind of ended the second one on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but since it was the high point of the Twilight, sparkly, romantic vampire thing, my vampires were scary. My vampires will kill you.
Yep.
And so people weren't in the mood for that. I think it might do a little better now, but what do you do?
Exactly. I think Bloody Vampires would sell now, yes.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking about doing the third one. And I also did 6 books about a race of Celtic fae that live in the mountains of Appalachia called the Tufa. And the first book in that series was called The Hum and the Shiver. And I'm really proud of that series. I'm really happy with how that came out all the way across the board. Cool. And so if anybody wants to start it, it's finished, so you don't have to worry about that. And it's out on Audible with an awesome reader. In fact, all my books are on Audible with the same reader, and he is amazing. His name is Stefan Rudnicki, and I can't tell you how happy I am with that. He makes my writing sound 20% better.
Stefano Rickney?
Stefan, Stefan.
Okay.
Rud, Rud, Nicky, Nicki.
That is really cool that he did all your books, and he can do Eddie and Tufa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he can do anything. I lucked up with him because when we hooked up, I didn't know anything about him. He was just sort of the reader I got as the luck of the draw thing, and
okay.
He and I have become friends over the years, and I can't imagine ever wanting anybody else to read my stuff.
That's huge. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I returned to horror 3 years ago with a book called Dandelion, which is Southern Gothic based in a small town in Tennessee, with the central conceit that big box stores are secretly run by Satan.
Ah. I
which
don't
is
know
not
about
hard
this
for
book. That's funny.
not not hard for anybody, I would think, to buy into.
Nope.
And then last year, and this was actually Stefan's idea, we did an audio exclusive collection of a bunch of my short stories, and going way back to my first published short story from 1996, called "Give the People What They Want." And it's as close as a writer will probably ever get to a greatest hits album, because it just, like I said, it covers everything from my first story to, at the time, my most recent one.
Okay.
So I totally stoked about how that came out.
Good.
And that one has my I've always been a big zombie fan, but I've never written about zombies before this because I just could never come up with a story that didn't sound like every other zombie story.
Okay.
And I finally did. So there's a zombie novella in there that you can't get anywhere else.
Nice to know. Okay. Well, that is quite the smorgasbord. Let's get into these questions.
Moving targets are harder to hit.
That's true. What is that? The Rolling Stone gathers no moss?
Yeah, something like that.
All right.
Although I think I've got some moss on me at this point.
Well, our beards are getting a little white.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with the program, I have a little timer here that I'm going to start as we get into our 24 questions. Alex was given 16 of these in advance, just basically to help him not have to sit here and think about answers. But there's 8 that he doesn't know are here, and they're more tongue-in-cheek, more a little entertaining. So you ready, Alex?
I'm ready.
Let's get this started. All right, question number 1. What color do you write in?
I just write in regular black.
All right. City or country kid? Where did you grow up? And
Country.
When you were out there playing, did you have friends or was it just you?
I knew some other kids, but I don't know if I'd call them friends. No, I grew up in a town of 300, 200 of whom were related to me, which limits your dating options. Or should.
Yeah, should.
But yeah, and so it might as well have been on a gravel road out in the country somewhere. In fact, the road by our house was paved in my lifetime, and it was paved so badly that they put the initial coat of gravel down and then paved the blacktop over it without letting the gravel settle. Okay. So you would go out and just see a car falling through the street. And it happened so often you didn't think anything about it because it's just, oh, yeah, Mr. Brasher's car fell through the street. I guess he'll have to get that out.
Oh, jeez. All right, so where was this?
This was Gibson, Tennessee.
Okay.
It's about an hour north of Memphis and about 20 minutes from Nutbush, which is where Tina Turner is from.
So, referencing what you started the program with, it means you know a little bit about the area you're writing in.
Yes, yes. You never get away from it, no matter how far north you go.
All right. Hey, if you could follow the yellow brick road, would you?
Yeah, yeah.
To get away from the Munchkins or to go somewhere?
Well, it's win-win either way on that.
When you're writing, what typically assails your ears?
I like as much white noise as I can get, and that includes like going to my local coffee shop to work,
really? Which
can get really loud, but none of it is my responsibility. Okay. A crying child, it's not my crying child. Yeah. Somebody drops a dish, I don't have to sweep it up. So I like to think I can work pretty much anywhere.
Okay.
But and when I'm home, I will put on a fan.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I like just blanket noise that I don't have to think about. Dead silence, I listen for things, and it's hard to concentrate.
True. Good point. I found the
I ch-
cafe life really challenging to write in when I was younger, but I'm slowly being able to do that now. Yes, mind my own business
well,
basically is what you said.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I would be a hermit if I were left to my own devices. So it does me good to get out. I
Okay,
mean, obviously, if I'm out in public, people will come up and say hi and talk to me for a minute, and that's okay because that's why I'm there. If I didn't want to talk to people, I would stay home.
but I would imagine over all this time you have a regular seat probably at a regular place, and the regulars know you're working, you're writing.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
Pretty much.
okay,
Yeah, my coffee shop of choice is Schulin's Chocolate Shop here in Mount Horeb.
nice.
Stop on by.
That's actually really cool. I like that. That's a Hallmark movie. All right, three of your favorite books as a child. What were they?
As a Okay, that is
Pre 18.
one is called Pagoo. It's about a hermit crab.
Okay.
And it's actually a book. It's not like a picture book or anything. It's a lot of illustrations, but there's also quite a bit of text.
Huh.
And the author painted his own illustrations from life in like tide pools that he went out and observed. So that one was always just vivid in my memory.
Cool.
And then there's The Land Before Time. No, not the Land That Time Forgot, the
Okay.
Edgar Rice Burroughs book.
Yep.
And if you know anything about Burroughs, he was a big believer in happy endings. But The Land That Time Forgot is actually part one of a trilogy. So it has a very downbeat ending on its own. And I loved that. If you read the whole trilogy, then not only does everybody live, but everybody finds a girlfriend and gets married by the end.
Okay.
So it's really a happy ending. But if you just read the first book, it ends kind of despairingly. And
Where in your history with Burroughs did that fall? Was that a first, or had you read other of his works?
I think I had read some Tarzan stuff, but I couldn't connect up his Tarzan with the Johnny Weissmuller movies that I saw on TV all the time. That was Tarzan. What are you talking about?
Okay.
But so this was based on the first book of his that I read and thought, this is really good.
Okay.
This really is going to stick with me.
All right.
And then the third one, boy, because I was reading constantly as a kid. Is it okay if I pick a comic book?
Sure. Yep. I've had several.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a comic book that came out called Devil Dinosaur.
Well, dinosaur.
And Devil Dinosaur has a weird etymology because you remember when Marvel did those huge volumes? They were giant.
Yes. Yes.
They did an adaptation of 2001
Okay.
that was one of those huge things. Jack Kirby wrote and drew it, so it's very Kirby-esque, and
Huh.
and that was so successful that we have to continue this. Imagine thinking that you're going to continue the story of 2001. So at first there was a comic series called 2001.
Okay.
And then that became a comic series called Machine Man, which, I barely remember anything about that one. But it's somewhere in there, he decided that the Moonwatcher character, one of the ape men from the beginning of 2001,
Yeah.
deserved his own series. But as you can imagine, that wasn't very interesting either. What he needed was a dinosaur. So even though 2001 was known for its scientific accuracy, Jack Kirby said, screw that, I'm going to have Moonwatcher hang out with a dinosaur. And it's a T-Rex who is bright red. So he's called Devil Dinosaur, even though it's hard to imagine much more BC than this story took place.
Okay.
So nobody was thinking about the devil then. And I was old enough when this happened to be astounded by the progress that this all made. Because I would go to this grocery store in a little town about 5 miles away that had a spinner rack of comics, and that's
Yeah.
where I would get my comics. And so, it's like, okay, there's no new episode of 2001. Oh, wait, Machine Man, that is a new episode. Oh, there's no new episode of Machine Man. Oh, wait, there's Devil Dinosaur. And I think at first it was Moonwatcher and Devil Dinosaur. So it just kept mutating as they desperately tried to find some way to continue to monetize this thing that I imagine was pretty expensive rights for.
Right.
So Devil Dinosaur didn't run for very long, but it's actually, they brought it back, and there's an animated series on Disney
Really?
that's aimed at small kids, where Devil Dinosaur gets thrown into the modern world.
Okay.
And
Oh, what if?
and he's taken up by this inner city kid who's a genius. And it shows my age, because it's the way it's drawn and the way it's edited, it gives me a headache. My 13-year-old loves it. She'll watch it all day. But I try to watch it, and it's like, I can't keep up.
Right.
My brain cells are they can't follow this editing.
You have me fascinated by this whole story.
Yeah. I may have some of the details wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on that. So I loved Devil Dinosaur for its insanity.
Yeah. So that was what, 70s, mid 70s?
Oh yeah.
70s?
Oh yeah, definitely 70s. Definitely.
Woo! I like that question. That gets out some really good answers. That was a doozy. All right, so right after that, one you haven't been pre-told, what was, or maybe is, your favorite cartoon? And when and where did you watch it?
Johnny Quest.
Okay.
I watched that obviously as a kid growing up, and I've shared it with my kids. And there was only one season of the original Johnny Quest.
Really?
I'm astounded by that. Yeah, I think 22 episodes.
Okay.
Because apparently, since they were drawing it deliberately very realistically, it took much longer and was much more expensive to make.
Okay.
And kids being stupid, they can just rerun those same 22 episodes for years.
Yep.
But I mean, they came back later and made they made shows where Johnny is a angsty teenager and a young adult, but I don't count those.
Yeah, they weren't the same. No.
But that first series, if you can overlook the racism, which is pretty blatant in some of the episodes, is just fantastic way to awaken a kid's sense of adventure.
Right.
That's exactly what it did for me. And it's even got a great title sequence. I never skip the title sequence.
All right. I remember watching it. I don't remember the title sequence. So.
Yeah, it's got this great jazzy theme, and yeah.
Cool.
It promises you a show that's so exciting you almost can't believe it, but everything from the title sequence actually is in an episode. So
those were good. Yes, when they matched up. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So you read some exciting adventure and watched some exciting adventure. Very formative, and you can see it play out in your writing today.
No, thank you.
Fun adventure. I have not read the Tufa. I have Hum and Shiver, but it's in my to be read.
That's the end of this call. Where's that red button? No, if you ever do, I hope you enjoy it.
Okay. It's piqued my interest, but I got 700 books plus in my to be read pile. So.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Takes a while. What is the best thing you think you have ever spent on furthering your writing career?
Oh, that is a tough one. And I would like to think the answer is different at different stages of my career.
Okay.
I mean, originally, the smartest thing I ever did was buy this old Do you remember when they made dedicated word processors? They
Yes.
weren't computers and they weren't typewriters.
Right.
They were kind of an unholy mix of the two.
Yep.
Well, I just about went into debt to buy one of those in the 90s. And that was the smartest thing I ever did because I'm a terrible typist. Absolutely terrible. To this day, I'm a terrible typist. And I learned to write on a typewriter, and my whatever I wrote would double its physical weight from the from the whiteout I had to use. And
Okay.
so getting this word processor thing really allowed me to, it allowed me to fix things on a screen. I mean, it was a little screen, but
Right.
still.
Yep.
And so that was a big thing. And later, well, no, around the same time, I was in a relationship with somebody who was not supportive. So I ended that relationship, moved 6 hours away, rented a bright blue efficiency apartment in a building that a friend of mine lived in. And that was a crucial step because I literally, for a year, a good 18 months, a good year and a half, I wrote a 3,000 word short story a week
Wow.
because everything that had been in my head that I hadn't been able to get out and had backed up was
Okay.
finally able to come out.
Sure.
And
Wow.
that was around the same time that I bought the word processor. So there was a conjunction there.
Okay.
And then moving forward, um, the first convention I ever went to was WisCon
Okay.
here in Madison. And I had never been. I was kind of too ashamed to go as a non-professional writer, as just a fan, because fans. Because I'd never been to one, I didn't realize that that's what you go for as. Even if you are a writer, you're going as a fan.
Right.
But fans of fantasy and science fiction were kind of looked down on by the general culture, and hey, maybe still are, but we have at least a little more economic power.
Right.
But I just never went. And then a friend here in Madison talked me into going to WisCon, and the very first panel I went to, as a not as a participant, but just as a viewer, I'm sitting in the audience, and I look, and right next to me is Jane Yolen, and I'm like, am I in the wrong row? Am I allowed to sit next to Jane Yolen? And
Right.
she's just there to hear the panel.
Yep.
So that was it let me find the community.
Good.
I had been pretty much working on my own, working through small press zines, corresponding by mail, physical mail with people. And you can't really get close to people that way, or at least I couldn't. But once I found out there was a real community of writers, editors, and readers and fans, I felt like I'd kind of broken through something in myself that way. So I haven't been to a con in a while, but there's other reasons for that. I'd still
Right.
gladly go to one.
Right. Yeah. WisCon was my first one as well. And in fact, did we meet there or did we meet online and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
meet there?
No,
Okay.
we did meet there. In fact, when my friend invited me to WisCon and told me what it was, I thought, are men allowed to go?
Right. That one and what's that small, more fanish one in Madison? Paul.
Te- TeslaCon?
No.
That's the steampunk one.
Yeah. There was a small one there. I actually met Pat Rothfuss and George Martin at that one.
OddCon.
OddCon, yes.
OdysseyCon.
Yeah, yep. Yep. That was actually my first con and then WisCon and they were like, welcome to this world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I been to several odd cons. I enjoyed that when it was around.
Yep. Yeah, that was a very unique one. All right, cool. I've had a couple good experiences. I haven't been to I go to Robert E. Howard Days every year, so technically that's a con, but we call it more of a family reunion because it's
Yeah.
So small in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing else to do but the con. I mean, not even a bar to hang out at. So,
I assume that's in Texas.
yes, it's in Cross Plains every June on the weekend closest to his death.
Ah,
So this year it'll be the 12th, 13th, and 14th. So that's good if you ever get a chance to do it. It is definitely
yeah,
worth. They have the museum there and everything.
I would really enjoy that one.
So, in your own writing, do you think it makes it easier or more challenging for you if you feel emotions strongly?
Oh, it makes it a lot easier.
Okay.
I mean, well, and this is something that Truman Capote, who's one of my favorite non-genre authors, talks about, is that if you're writing something and you're really emotionally affected by it, you have to go back and fine tune it to the point that you aren't emotionally affected anymore if you want your reader to be affected. Because if you leave it the way it affects you, it's going to be too much for the reader.
Okay.
You have to really bring your skill A game to fix that for the final draft. But yeah, particularly when I'm first drafting something, if it's something that I'm really into, that just makes it so much easier.
Sure. That's a good quote. I like that.
Yeah.
The
I wish I could take
yeah,
credit for that.
yeah. No, it really makes you think about it because you're right. You got to balance it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Titles. Do you find them challenging, and when do you come up with them? Do you start with them, pop up during the middle, or not till it's all over with?
It kind of varies. Most of them, I'm terrible at titles to begin with. Everything, I'd say my first 5 books were all retitled.
Okay.
Now, I was involved in the titling, so that was good.
Yeah.
But I've gotten much better at it. And I don't think anything has been sent out under any other title, probably the last 10 books out of
Okay.
the 15 that I've got. They've all gone out under the title I chose. And usually I've got a pretty good idea of like with Dandelion, I knew the title of that going in because it's a play on a demon's name.
Okay.
And I knew that demon was part of the story, so I thought, well, this is a good title, and if somebody doesn't think so, we'll come up with something else.
Well, it's unique enough to stand out too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I usually have a title pretty early in the process.
Okay. That's such a wide-ranging answer to that. It's like giving
Yeah,
writing
yeah,
advice. It works differently for everyone.
yeah.
So, all right. So when you're working on a project, I'm curious about your timeline. When you first think of an idea, any research, rough drafts, to when is finally you say this is submittable?
Um, Usually I'm willing to show the third draft to somebody.
Okay.
And, after that, I'm taking input from like an editor or an agent or something like that. Um, and that can take from first sentence to final typing. It's about 9 months
Okay.
average. Some take longer. I mean, some things don't need a lot of research. Like if you're doing a sword and sorcery fantasy where you're making everything up, you don't have to do a lot of research.
Right.
Although I do anyway. But some stuff you just really have to bury yourself in the concept for a while and just kind of let it percolate in your head. I have found that if I'm writing something that's in like a different setting, I get better quicker results if I just go ahead and write it the way I think it is
Okay.
and then do the research after that
Right.
when
Yep.
I'm doing revisions. Because if I'm worried about getting all the details right on the first draft, I'll never get it done.
Understood. Yep. Common problem. You get caught up in the research or the fixing and the tweaking, and then you lose your momentum.
I was doing the fourth Eddie LaCrosse book called Wake of the Bloody Angel, and it's a pirate story. So even though it's a fantasy story, I was researching pirates because I wanted to put as many realistic details in as I could because that would balance the fantasy elements and make them more real, they would seem more realistic by comparison.
Right.
And I got so freaking bogged down in that it just ground to a halt, and I didn't know what to do. So I sat my son, who I guess was probably 7 or 8, down. I said, I'm going to tell you the story up until the point I'm at, and you tell me what you think should happen next.
Oh, that's cool.
So I did, and he thought about it, and he said, they need to meet a sea monster.
Have a guy with a gun run through the door.
It's like, shit, you're right. That's what they need. They need a sea monster. I'm not writing a historical fantasy. I can do anything I want here. And that broke it through. So the story starts off with Eddie giving his story, but then he meets Jane Argo. So then they go on a pirate ship, and he learns how to do sails and things like that. And then they start going to these islands and looking for things, and then the ship keeps going and going and going. Hey, so what'd you think?
I think it needs a sea monster.
A sea monster?
Yes.
Wow, what a great idea. Thank you. And they do meet a sea monster, so.
That is so awesome. When you're all done writing for the day, are you exhausted, just need a hot bath and a good drink, or are you ready to rumble and get out of the house?
No, I'm done. I am ready to sit in front of the couch and watch either some British crime show that my wife and I are watching, or, I, my daughter has been binging Modern Family for the last 2 years. She'll watch all 11 seasons and then start over. So I go hang out with the Dumfies for a while.
Okay. Just total chill. All right.
Yeah.
Would you live in any of the worlds you've created?
Well, I have a fair number of things set in the real world.
True.
I wouldn't mind living in the imaginary Tennessee county that I created for the Tufa novels. I think I'd like that. But other than that, you're making things dramatic, and I don't like living in drama. So no, I don't think so.
I teach a monthly character writing class. If I invited you in and gave you 30 seconds to give one piece of advice, what would you say?
About writing a specific character in general?
Nope, just writing. Just a single piece of writing advice. It doesn't have to be about characters.
Write something every day.
Okay.
That is the crucial thing, I think. It's like, and when I teach this, I use the I point out, I say, athletes train every day, even though they don't play in a game every day. And
right.
You are a writer, so you have to write every day so that when you get that great idea, your technical skill is ready for it.
Yep.
Because a great idea is wasted on somebody who can't develop it.
Right. Yep.
So.
Very good. You'd be preaching to the choir, hopefully.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most difficult thing you have ever written?
There are sections of a lot of my books that I have taken pieces of my own life and used. In fact, if you read The Hum and the Shiver, which you haven't done yet, but
I own it.
There's a section in there that is exactly how I found out that somebody in my family had died. It's pretty much a recreation of the exact scene of that. And I did that because I couldn't think of a better one. Okay. I couldn't think of anything that didn't seem melodramatic or over the top or what do you too understated. Yeah. So I put that in there.
Did you have to apply that earlier conversation about emotion?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And there's stuff like that in several of my books where the book itself was not hard to write, but there were sections that were.
Okay. I mean, there is a little piece of us in each thing we write, even if we deny it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So if you especially include it, yeah, I could see that. A little bit more upbeat here. I'm giving you some sporting choices.
Okay.
It's an either or. Swimming pool or shooting pool?
Shooting pool.
All right. Tennis court or basketball court?
Basketball court.
And driving range or target range?
Target range.
All righty. A little bit physical activity there. Do you have a favorite quote, and would you share it?
A favorite quote?
Or a song lyric or poem?
I love the opening chorus speech from Henry V, where the "Oh, for a Muse of Fire" speech, because it's talking about how you hope that you will live up to the idea that you've had, that the Muse of Fire will come to you to let you create what you want to create.
Okay.
And then there's also a Bruce Springsteen song lyric that says, "You've got to learn to live with what you can't rise above." Right. And I've found that to be truer and truer the older I get.
I forgot to check my emails. Did you send me either one of these in your
No.
answers? Okay. All right.
No.
All right. 10 first thoughts. I'm going to throw a single word out at you, and I'd like your response.
All right.
Spade.
David.
Mediocre.
Too many people.
Stampede.
Red River, because there's a moment in that movie where John Wayne yells "stampede" in a very distinctive way.
Nice. Fedora.
Indiana.
All right. Delivery.
Amazon.
Tundra.
Wisconsin.
Cutlass.
Supreme.
I always wonder where you're going to go. Mask.
Zorro.
Speech.
I have a dream.
You actually, like, video cutout. What was the answer?
I have a dream.
I have a dream. All right. And the last one is fructose.
Evil, because I'm a type 2 diabetic.
Okay. Very evil. We are at 30 minutes and doing well. We're question 18 here. Nonfiction.
All right.
Do you read any of it? And would you share some recent titles?
Oh, good Lord. I read it all the freaking time.
Okay.
I am currently researching the Italian Renaissance painter Piero della Francesca. So I am in the middle of reading. It's called Piero della Francesca, Artist and Man.
Okay.
And it is, of all the books I've read on him, it's the most useful to what I want to write about. So I went ahead and bought a copy. So I'm waiting for that to come in so I can turn this one back into the library. I also I've read a lot of nonfiction about Truman Capote's life.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that out there.
Yep.
And my agent has a manuscript that I wrote about ancient Egypt. So I read a lot about that.
Ooh, you got a title?
A lot about that.
You got a title? You have a title to recommend at all? Or suggest?
I would recommend of Piero della Francesca this book, the Piero della Francesca and the Invention of the Artist. It's a very good introduction. The Truman Capote, I would recommend the biography that's just called Capote by Gerald Clark.
Okay, yep.
And for ancient Egypt, what is the name of that book? It's It's about the Queen Hatshepsut, and it's written by Kara Cooney. And I am totally blanking on the title. And I'd have to get up and go look to find it.
Not a problem. Who was the topic of that one?
Hatshepsut, Hatshepsut.
Okay, I'll find it.
It was one of the few female pharaohs that we know of.
All right. Cool. I'll be floating these covers up here so people can, anyone interested can pursue them too. Take a look at them.
Sure.
Who is a visual artist or more than one whose works move you, that just awe you?
Well, Piero della Francesca. That's why I want to write about him, because I came across his work in a Russian film called Nostalgia. And it's nostalgia, except there's an extra H after the G.
Okay.
And I looked up the painting that they had shown in that movie and just got fascinated by this guy.
Okay.
So, and of course, Van Gogh is always awe-inspiring. They had a exhibit here in Madison where basically they rented an empty storefront and put projectors in the empty store. So all the walls and ceiling had this, gradually metamorphosizing thing of Van Gogh's work. So you you were sort of standing in it.
Twice.
And that'll make
That was down here in San Antonio twice and got canceled both times. I never got to go, but I wanted to go. So you liked it? That was cool?
Yeah. It'll make a believer out of anybody.
Okay.
Yeah. I like Gauguin. I like his interpretation of things that I know a lot about what he was painting and what they looked like in real life, and his interpretation of them is fascinating.
Okay.
So yeah, all of those.
Okay. Very cool. Right now I can't picture anything of Gauguin, but I'll find him.
Oh yeah. He's out there.
How do you go about giving depth to your characters, and do you treat different level characters differently?
No, I treat them all the same.
Really? Okay.
I try not to ever have anybody show up who's just, say, a comic relief character or just a villain, well, really a henchman. But, it's a matter of teaching, if you don't have it naturally, teaching yourself empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Every character thinks they're the hero of the story, including the villains.
Right.
And you have to be able to step into that in order to depict it accurately. You can't have a villain. I once did a reading very early in my career before I understood what readings were supposed to be like. And this teenage girl just sort of barged up to me after it and said, I want to read you part of my story. And I'm like, okay. So she read me this story about this black-clad villain striding through his black castle until he reached his black throne, where he sat down and had his black thoughts. And as I'm hearing this, all I'm thinking about is a guy in the dark tripping over everything that's in the way, which I think would be funny. If you had a villain that painted everything black and then found out that wasn't the best idea.
Right.
But it really drove home, your villain has to think he's the hero. Or he has to have some sort of realistic personality.
Right.
He could have a lack of empathy, which makes him evil.
Yep.
But that's a personality. You can work with that.
Sure.
You can't just have, it's hard to get away with a villain who's just evil for the sake of being evil. I know those people exist, but I don't enjoy writing about them.
Yeah. Yep. Chaos.
So
for the sake of chaos. Yep.
I think empathy is one of the biggest tools a writer has to have.
Okay. All right. I can see that. So which of your own characters would you like to hang out with or have as a close companion?
I'd like to hang out with Eddie LaCrosse. I think he'd be fun. Not not go anywhere with him, but just hang out at the tavern.
Okay,
You know?
there you go. Yeah.
I think he would be fun to hang out with.
Here.
I have a. Oh, go ahead.
Oh
Go
no,
ahead.
no. Continue.
I was going to say, there's a couple of characters in my Tufa books that I think are solid people I'd like to hang out with.
Okay.
So,
And those
yeah.
are those take place in a more modern setting, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, totally contemporary.
Okay.
Just
All right.
just up in the mountains.
Yep. Okay. As I say, here is perhaps my most favorite question of my interview.
Okay.
Who writes the characters you like to read?
Robert B. Parker, his Spencer character is really formative in my understanding of what I wanted to write, how I wanted to write it, understanding how to put a story together.
Okay.
So I can't say enough about that. In that same sort of genre, Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe.
Yep.
And to a certain extent, Ross McDonald's Lou Archer.
Okay.
But Archer is sort of a transitional character to me between Chandler and Parker. So he's not quite enough of Chandler and not quite enough of Parker, but you can see where he came from and where it's going.
Okay.
So yeah, and I like the character of Marlowe from Heart of Darkness. I like there's a book that Lee Smith wrote called The Devil's Dream that is sort of a history of country music told through one family.
Okay.
And that's a tricky thing to pull off, and she manages to do it in a bunch of different character voices.
Huh. Okay.
And I've always been impressed by that.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's a new one for me. Obviously, I've read the well, not obviously, but I have read the other three, so I'll have to look that up. I'm a character guy.
Yeah. Well, I think any good writer is good with character. I think that's.
Okay.
I mean, if you read about like Raymond Chandler, he was almost entirely a character-driven writer. He couldn't plot to save his life. That's why so many of his novels reuse the same plots from his short stories.
Sure.
He always envied Earl Stanley Gardner because Gardner could write a plot like nobody's business. Not a good writer, not good characters, but he could plot like crazy. I put Clive Cussler is in that category. He can plot like nobody's business. He can high concept you to death, but his characters are awful. I just a couple of years ago I did an essay on the movie Raise the Titanic. Okay. So I went back and reread the novel, and it was almost impossible to read. It is so bad. And some of the dialogue that apparently actual human beings are supposed to have spoken is, I mean, there's no way, there's not an actor good enough to make this sound like believable human speech.
But he's churned them out. Yeah. Oh, he's a great plotter, like storyteller. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I know the majority of people, at least in my world, the majority of people are character fans. They're most moved by characters, but I have two, and I've interviewed one of them, moved by plot. He doesn't really care so much about the characters as long as the plot has him addicted. So that's a different mindset.
There must be, yeah, and there's plenty of those people out there, judging by what sells.
Yep. So, if you could have the opportunity to write anybody's character from any medium, who would you write?
Captain Kirk.
Cool.
I would love to just be turned loose on Captain Kirk, but I've never tried to do that because I know you're never turned loose on these things. Yeah. You have to get, your outline approved. I have friends who have written Star Trek novels and go with God. Life's too short. if I can't do what I want.
That would be really challenging. Get asked to do that, but then here's all these rules.
But I think the character of Captain Kirk is one of the richest genre characters out there. I think there's so much to him that I would love to do it.
Okay.
I would love to, but c'est la vie.
That would be fun, actually. And the last question: are you trying to share anything at all in your writing?
I don't think so, except the guiding thought I have, and a lot of this is because I didn't start getting published till I was in my 40s. Is when I look at my shelf of published books, I want to be proud of them, and I want to feel like my kids and grandkids, if they want to know about me, they can read these books and get a sense of the person I was.
Cool.
And if I try to write something that I don't feel that about, I just can't do it.
Yep.
I mean, it comes out terrible.
That is great. A legacy for your kids. Yep. They should be able to identify you, piece of you in each of those. Yep. Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing. We ended at 43 minutes. I'm going to stop the timer here. So we did very well. And now this is your opportunity. We're looking to hear about something you think is a little cold, you'd like some attention on. Something current and something coming if you're willing to share any surprises.
Sure. As far as Cole stuff, I would like people to go back and find those first two vampire novels, Blood Groove and The Girls with Games of Blood. Yep. I'm really proud of they are horror novels. They are not romance novels. They are not horromantasy novels, which is a term I just learned. These are scary novels, and I'm really proud of them. They're period pieces. They're set in the 1970s in Memphis, and they're set specifically in 1975 because I wanted them to be set before Anne Rice emerged.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
Interview with a Vampire didn't come out till 76.
Okay.
So, and it's what was the second one? I'm sorry.
Current. Anything current? Yep.
Current. I would hope people would try. If you got an Audible subscription, try my short story collection. Give the people what they want. It's got everything.
Cool. Yep. All right.
It's got stuff from all my book series, and in standalones, and like I said, my first zombie novella.
I'll look for it.
Yeah.
All right. And anything coming or projects you're working on or want to hint at?
I just signed the contract for a novel called While the City Never Sleeps. And it's basically a sort of urban fantasy crime thriller that starts with a decapitation and shows how the ripples from that go through the police, the crime world, the journalism world, and the fact that there is a female vigilante who shoots lightning.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, I'm real tickled with this one.
Is this a potential another start to a ongoing character?
Maybe. It's more of a. It'd be more similar. Yeah, me no words. It would be similar to the Tufa series in that if it's a series, it'll be set around a location,
okay,
rather than a particular character.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, who knows?
That sounds exciting.
If the first one does well and there's interest, yeah, I can always come up with another story.
I have to tell you, I have always liked the vast majority of your novel titles.
Thank you.
Especially the Eddie ones. And I saw, I don't know, was it a month or two ago, you had made a comment on Facebook, I think, asking if people wanted another Eddie or another Tufa. Is there another possible Eddie coming out there?
There's always a possibility.
Okay.
Until I kill him off, he can always come back. It's mainly a matter of time. I mean, I'm currently first drafting one manuscript and researching another one that I've already outlined. So who knows?
Yep.
If somebody wants to throw money at me and say, write another Eddie, that'll move it to the front of the line.
Very true.
So,
Well, we'll get some people watching this to start making some phone calls.
There you go.
Hey, Alex, thank you very much for spending your time and
Oh,
going through all this with us. It's wonderful to get to learn your universe.
well, thanks for inviting me, Jason. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
My thanks to Alex for braving a Wisconsin snowstorm to sign books all those years ago, to sitting down with 24 and 42 and sharing his life, universe, and everything tonight. We learned of some great quotes, titles, and writing concepts, and of something really new coming in Alex's writing. If you haven't met Eddie yet, you should make it a priority. I know I'd read an Alex Bledsoe Captain Kirk adventure. Anyone have Shatner's number? Until next time, this was 24 in 42.